Well, hello there. Good morning. Welcome to Existential Sunday. If you are, well, afternoon, if you're watching this later on, or good evening, depending on when you're watching it, if you're not actually catching this live, um, hello to you also. For those of you watching live or those of you watching later, my name is Corey. If we have not met, I am a husband, father, podcaster, speaker, writer. Yeah, I think that's the list. Other things I do. Oh, I'm also a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach. So that is who I am. Nice to meet you. If we've not met, please leave a comment either on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram if we've not met one another, and I would love to connect with you. This is Existential Sunday, which is a space carved out for conversations. Or in this case, dialogue or conversation in the comments around decolonization and deconstruction of faith or worldviews. Folks that are sort of going through that, right? This is a place where we come with questions, with some of the ideas behind the ideas, like the thing behind the thing that's behind the thing that maybe we have questions about, that certainly people who have been a part of like religious circles haven't felt the freedom to discuss, and so we carved out this space for that purpose. So that's what you are a part of. Welcome to all of you. Feel free to share this broadcast. You don't have to ask my permission. You can share it on Instagram. You can share it on Facebook. You can share it through YouTube. Feel free, share away. Those of you coming in live that have been a part of this all the time, you know what to do. Hit the share button and share this with your friends and family. I have three things I want to talk about, and then I'm going to be done. Hopefully I won't be very long this week. I want to talk about the president and the virus. I want to talk about the debates from earlier this week and some things that I observed in that. And then lastly, I want to give us a charge of what we as citizens, as human beings, as people of goodwill. I assume that folks watching this are people of goodwill. What is our obligation? What are we as a people to do? How are we to respond to things that we see? So I want to first start with the COVID-19. Of course, the news came out, I think, late Thursday night that the president and his wife did indeed get COVID-19. And I think we all had a mix of emotions. We all felt something. Some people may have felt afraid. Some people may have felt a sense of, I don't know what that term would be for the good riddance type of that announcement that the president had COVID. And the thing that really stood out to me was the people of faith who are people who pray, or maybe people who, well, you have to be a person of faith, even if you're not necessarily assigned to a tribe of faith. If you're praying, that's faith, that somehow somebody is hearing it. And prayer, ultimately, I read a really cool definition for it recently. It is naming what's most important to you. And so I saw this tension on the internet of I'm praying for the president versus hell no, I'm not praying for the president. In fact, I saw one quote I saw, which was from one of my great friends, people I respect the most, Andre Henry, said, I'm sorry, not sorry. I'm not praying for Pharaoh. And I think that's sort of the tension, is that there's this feeling, certainly by Christians, not even just evangelical. I'm not going to go on an evangelical Christian rant right now, at least not right now, maybe later. This tension that exists, that if I am a follower of Jesus, if I'm a person who considers myself to take the teachings of Jesus seriously, the ethos of who Jesus was historically, and who we believe Jesus to be now, in sort of this metaphysical thing that I won't get into because it's way too deep for this particular conversation. I would have this sense of pray for my enemies, love my enemies. So even if I'm a person who views Trump as an enemy, which is, in my opinion, any person with a shred of morality. Even if I view him as an enemy, there's this words of Jesus that show up that I have to do something with. Like I can't just ignore them. That's a part of, again, the Christian tradition, being a person who is of that faith, is I can't ignore it. And I imagine for most faith traditions, there's an ethos of loving beyond just people I like, people I know, people who are kind, people, list goes on. There is this thing out there. I have to do something with it. I as a person of character, and a person who believes in goodness and all of the stuff in the universe that like is uplifting and full of peace and joy and just overall goodness. There's something in that has to, I would imagine, at least for me, make me go, I don't know if I can like not pray. And I've been in scenarios. I think I've told you guys before. I was fired from a place where I was working, and I believe to this day, more and more as I look back at it, and I look back at how people operate who still work there, look back at some of the interactions I had, I'm like, I was fired in part, at least in part, because of my outspokenness about issues of Black lives. And I have found myself over the last several years, whenever the face and name of the people responsible for firing me come up in my mind, I've found myself going, I'm going to pray for them. But here's the thing, right? I allow myself as a human being, because of what I feel, to be honest in my prayers. And this is where that definition that I mentioned earlier, feels really rich and appropriate, when prayer is naming the thing that's important to you and naming why and how it's important to you. That prayer is not generic, or this thing that only Christians can do, or only people, who subscribe to a certain religion can do. Every person can name what's important to you, name why it's important to you and how it's important to you. So when it comes to praying for these folks, I don't always pray, God bless them, keep them healthy, keep them from harm or danger. I pray honest prayers. God, I don't like them. I borderline hate them. Like at times I do hate them. I hope that what they're doing crumbles, because I'm a human being. And that may be just the initial prayers. That maybe that's just where it starts for me. That it's just me naming that I don't care if that place closes down. In fact, I hope it does. Hold on. And I don't feel an ounce of guilt over that level of honesty when I decide to pray for or about people I deem to be my enemies. We see in the Hebrew Testament of the Bible that many of the Psalms have these sort of kill my enemy type things. So we flat out say that. And that's left for us to see as an example of how a human being responds to gross adversity from an adversary. There's a scene in the movie Harriet. I'm not spoiling anything. Harriet came out a while ago. If you want to see it, you'd already seen it. Plus, it is what it is. It's not like it's this great plot. This is historic. This is history. There's a scene in Harriet early on where Harriet Tubman goes to this tree where she always prays, and she begs God to kill her master. And I imagine that any of us watching this, it's not hard for us to accept as a reality that a slave would pray that their master would die. Like that's just, It's understandable. None of us would go, oh, you have to pray for the well-being of your slave master who won't let you free, who won't let you marry, who rapes you and who snatches your children away and sells them to other plantations, who separates families and rapes the women and beats the men and dehumanizes people. That, like, none of us would look at a slave and say, you know what, you really should be praying blessings over your master. Nobody would say that. There's another scene in Handmaid's Tale where one of the handmaids prays that their oppressors would die. And you watch this scene. If you've ever watched Handmaid's Tale, you see this in this moment. You go, yeah, yes, me too. That's also my prayer for your masters. I hope that's what happens. So the tension exists, that we can understand why any person of color in this country would hope for the removal of the lightning rod, the catalyst for so much anti-Blackness in America right now. That it's reasonable that they would say, at minimum, I'm not praying for this man. But even if they were praying for his demise, I don't know that we as human beings could look at them and say, you're wrong for that. You know, I want to make sense of what I just said for those of you that are like, ooh, that may be confused. There are people in my life who I love and who love me, family, who are more conservative than I am, both politically, probably spiritually, in every way, probably so. And one day, one of these people asked me a question, right? And they tend to ask me questions as opposed to trying to argue with me, which I appreciate. So they asked me a question, and the question was about, when will people be satisfied? When will people stop with, like, the protests and the demonstrations and the movements and the uprisings? When what will satisfy them? And it was in really revolving around the Breonna Taylor situation, right? This was, I think, before the ruling, or maybe shortly after. And my response was something that you may agree or may disagree with. It's just, you know, this isn't a space where you have to agree with me. But my response was to talk about justice in a way that the way I view it is that when it comes to things like justice and goodness and these, like, grand ideas about the world and divine things and human things, I feel like we're a bunch of children playing in a sandbox. And we're just trying to build castles, but they ain't really castles. We're trying to construct things in this sandbox, things that are, you know, a reflection of something that's bigger, something that's more solid. But we're doing our best in this sandbox to build the constructs of things that we think are wholesome and good. And when it comes to justice, the moment that Breonna Taylor was killed, the moment that Michael Brown was killed, the moment that Trayvon Martin was killed, the moment that Nina Pop was killed, the moment that Tamir Rice, the list goes on and on. The moment any of these Black men and women were killed by police or violent white supremacists, justice sort of went out the window to some degree. Like the distribution of well-being and resource and dignity and sustenance went out the window when their life was taken because they're Black. And so what we try to construct now is this sand castle that is, arrest the cops, charge them, arrest the people who killed him, arrest George Zimmerman, kill George Zimmerman. Whatever those things are, it's us in a sandbox trying to construct something that is not actually that, but it's our best human attempt at it. Because at the end of the day, these people are still dead, and that once injustice happens, our best attempt to repair it still doesn't heal ultimately the wound that we have. We're just trying our best to get the scales of justice to be back in alignment. And when we find out that the president of the United States, who is a lightning rod for white supremacist rhetoric, has a deadly disease and virus, we wonder, is that going to help even out the scale of justice, the distribution of dignity for people of color? Which moves me to the next thing I want to talk about, my reaction to the debates. I waited all week to give my reaction to the debates. Of course, if any of you who watched it, you could assume what my reactions were. I posted this week that imagine not being able to condemn white supremacy because your voter base is full of white supremacists. That is our president. That people who hate for people who look like me to be anything other than underneath them hear a president who has their back. Hear a president who is reluctant to all out condemn them. Hear a president who makes white supremacy and the movement for Black lives out to be the same. It's like parents sort of understand this, as I guess do children, right? Like when your children get into an argument and you look at both of them because you don't understand what's actually happening. You look at both of the children that are arguing and you say, both of you shut up. Both of you go to your room. Both of you just stop fighting. Not knowing that there is one child who initiated it. There's one of the kids who actually started it. There is actually a catalyst for the conflict. And what we see happening with the president is that he continues to side with, low-key, the child who started the argument. He continues to side with white supremacists who are truly inciting violence, showing up as agents provocateurs at otherwise peaceful protest. And he continues to be reluctant to condemn them because those folks voted and will vote for him. They support him. They believe in him. They believe he speaks their language. They believe that in him they have an advocate, an ally, someone to speak up for them, to use his voice to speak up for them. And I'm going to tell you the most disturbing thing about that debate. It wasn't even for me the fact that, he fumbled over his words in condemning white supremacy. And make no mistake, to fumble over your words when condemning white supremacy means that it's not in you. You cannot process out loud something that you've not wrestled with inside. If it ain't been wrestled with in here and wherever the soul is within us as human beings, if you've not really wrestled with that thing, if you've not really come to some sort of conclusion that you've vetted, when you have to talk about it out loud, you will fumble over your words, especially under the hot, bright lights of a world of a debate that's watched around the world. It wasn't in him. But that wasn't the most disturbing part, that he fumbled over those words. The most disturbing part was that he did not fumble over his words when he was asked about why he wrote the executive order to get rid of critical race theory trainings. His response to that, and this conversation during debates, if you need to go back and watch it, you can. If you watch it, you know what I'm talking about when I say it was couched in a implicit bias training type of conversation and dialogue. It wasn't just about critical race theory. It was about teaching people about implicit bias. And the president of the United States said that the reason why I got rid of it is because it teaches people to hate America and it makes certain people feel bad, feel like they're evil. So now if you are a person who teaches or writes curriculum or believes that America has institutional, structural, intentionally created racist structures, procedures, policies, ways of being that are fundamental to America, you now hate America, which puts a target on your back for violent rhetoric and violence, period. You become a person, you become essentially a terrorist. If you are an advocate for Black lives, you are essentially, based on the rhetoric from this White House and from this president, you are essentially a terrorist. You are propagating, teaching, believing things that are anti-American. And you know what? Why I'm disturbed by it? It's because it's true. White supremacy. This is what the president said. If you play the tape backwards, when we used to do that, you play the record backwards to hear from like those heavy metal bands. At least you heard. This is what a bunch of Christians said. If you play the tape backwards, you'll hear them telling you to worship the devil or something. Like if you play the president's words backwards, right? Here's what you will hear is that white supremacy is so fundamental to America that opposing it means you hate America. Trying to undermine it means that you are anti-America because it is so fundamentally woven into our way of thinking and being that white people are superior to Black people. So anyone who comes forward to tell white folks, listen, you've been taught something about your existence. And it's been reinforced by how you were treated, reinforced by what you read in history books, reinforced by what you see on television when you see a hero versus the villain. All of this has been reinforced to you that you are somehow supreme and superior to Black and brown folks. But guess what? You're not. When you start saying, guess what? You're not, you are opposing the way that the country was established. And the president basically admitted that on national television. That was the most disturbing part. Not only that being the most disturbing part, the fact that there is a base of people to appeal to with that kind of rhetoric is actually what's really disturbing. The president's rhetoric in a vacuum is just like someone saying stuff in a barbershop. It's like LeVar Ball talking about his son. And you just go, okay, that's amusing. But the fact that there are receivers of this rhetoric who process that rhetoric through their own deeply held, hateful ideologies, those people feel emboldened to show up with assault rifles to declare war against modern day terrorists. That's the scary part. That's the disturbing part. That's the thing that had me feeling really dark the last couple of days of last week, feeling depressed, feeling afraid, concerned for my family and other folks who look like me and talk like me and believe the things that I believe and say the things that I say. Because this country has persistently tried to rid itself of the voices that are saying things that matter and are important, saying things that are trying to level out and to bring the scales of justice to a more balanced place when it comes to all of its citizens. So yeah, that was disturbing to me. And I believe that every one of us, as I said earlier, people of goodwill, people with somewhat of a morality and ideas about justice and injustice. And I know that we're not all going to fall on the same side of things. And I understand that we live in a time and in a day where our binary good and bad is is being challenged and should be challenged and should be interrogated. But there is a sense of that is wicked that we have to, as human beings, recognize. And all of us, I think, have a responsibility with those who will listen to show what is wicked and what is just and what's in between. But certainly for our children, for the next generation, to be examples and to be teachers of just and fair and inclusive and open-handed and compassion and love and peace. We all of these massive concepts that we don't fully understand because we are kids playing in the sandbox, trying to construct things like love and goodness and joy and peace and justice. I understand that, like, we as human beings are doing the best we can, but we do have that obligation to do the best we can, to have conversations and invite other people into the conversations, people that we trust, people we're in community with, to have the conversations about these big things so that we do and are able to contend for the better world that is possible. This thing that's out there, this like that people who wrote ancient text because they didn't have television and internet to distract them from really sitting and thinking about the deep things of life and understanding their world and how it worked. Like, they would sit and they would write about these concepts that we're still wrestling with today. Like, we do have an obligation to do that, to introduce nuance to our conversations. Otherwise, I don't know how we survive as people. I hope I don't sound like an alarmist or too much of a downer, but that's just our reality, folks, is that we have to look at the world that we're living in, look where it's trending, and ask ourselves, what can we do? What can we as human beings, again, as people of good faith? I'm really not even talking to you folks out there who maybe you got hold to this video and you're like, everything this guy is saying is bullshit. Fine. I don't know why you're still watching at this point. But if that is you, I'm not really talking to you when I talk about people of good faith. People of good faith. Those folks who can hear, who have ears to hear and eyes to see, where a divine spirit is moving you to like have a conscience and a sense of there's some goodness out there and we can find it. We can preserve the world. We have a relationship to the land, to the earth, to where our feet walk. We have a relationship and we have a bond with that and the animals and each other as human beings. And that all of that together should not be broken. It should be in harmony somehow. If you're a person that believes that, then we got work to do, right? And I told you, I'll never tell you who to vote for, but I will say to you, as we approach November 3rd, and you're a person who can vote, number one, you should make sure you register to vote. Please, for the love of God, register to vote and don't sit out. Because not just about who's going to be the president, but there are some local initiatives that you really should be paying attention to in your state, in your town. Let's vote against white supremacy. And let's vote against the destruction of our world. Wherever that leads you to vote, I think that's important. I think that matters. I think that the better world we're talking about involves there not being a hierarchy based on your skin color or your gender. This caste system that we continue to be beholden to is not, it needs to be toppled. It's not something that makes our world fair or just. And this planet is the only one we have, and we got to take care of it. All right, folks, that's all I have for you this week. I really appreciate all of you who watched. If you watched this for 29 minutes, I'd encourage you to share it because you found it somewhat compelling, if not maddening, but you still watched it this whole time. So I encourage you to share it. You never have to ask, again, never have to ask my permission. If you're watching this on Instagram, you can share it. If you're watching it on Facebook, you can share it, or tag folks in the comments. If you don't want to actually have this on your wall, you can tag people that you think need to hear this or would, be interested in hearing it. And of course, you can share the YouTube link if you're watching on YouTube. All right, folks, thanks so much for watching. Grace and peace to all of you.